I missed a massive bit of information from yesterday's dev stream, specifically during the Q&A. They talked about how inside of the deep desert, they have lowered the player cap down from 900 all the way down to 300. And in all honesty, this is probably the biggest piece of information to come out of yesterday's live stream. I cannot believe that I missed it. And today I'm going to go a little bit more into detail as to what the possible ramifications may be from this 300 player cap inside of the deep desert. Big shout out to John Jones, who commented on my deep desert solo strategy video that I put out and brought attention to this whole 300 player cap, because otherwise this is information that I just would not have even known. But let's go ahead, cut this plug, and jump right on into it here. The first concern that I'm seeing people have is the fact that they think that the 300 player cap is going to make it to where running into PvP is a problem. And because of the sheer size of the deep desert, that may actually be the case, where PvP is a bit few and far between. But with certain events happening, drawing people to central locations, I'm sure that PvP is going to exist. On top of that, we have the fact that 300 players is still a decent amount of players. If we take a look at Rust, for example, their official servers have a player cap of 100 players. And while the information I'm looking up about the Rust map is pointing out the fact that it's only 4 kilometers and the deep desert is set to be 500 kilometers. So the deep desert is substantially bigger. However, a lot of the deep desert is sand. So I'd imagine if you're really on the hunt for some people, you're gonna be able to find them. But PvP encounters aren't the only issue that people are bringing up. They're also talking about the fact that this may possibly lead into people having to deal with queues to even get into the deep desert, and this is actually a major problem. From what I'm looking up on Reddit, people are saying that each world is going to have 20 Hugga basins. I don't know if this is official. Let me know down in the comments if there's an official number out there. But if we just take that number of 20 Hugga basins and multiply it by the player cap of 40, we're going to get a total of 800 players per world. This is almost 3 times the amount of player cap for the deep desert, which definitely could lead to some situations during peak time where there are well more than 300 people who are trying to get into the deep desert, which would mean that this would for sure lead into some sort of queuing system, you would assume. And this is concerning. It's strange because I'm picking up a lot of rumors now. Granted, these are all rumors, so take them with a grain of salt, but I'm picking up rumors on Reddit that the player cap for the deep desert used to be 900, but they've lowered it to 300, and the original plans for the player cap was 500. And just if they had managed to make the deep desert work with 900 players, there could never possibly be a queue because there's only 800 possible players who could be in there at one single time. I don't know. It's a bit strange. I'm also seeing some rumors on Reddit that even inside of the closed beta right now, they're having to deal with deep desert queues. And I'm not sure if the 300 player cap is like implemented in the current build that they're testing. I'm not in the closed beta. I have no idea what's going on over there. The point is here that if we are going to have to deal with queues, that is going to be a problem. But the question is, how often are we going to have to deal with queues? Because it's entirely possible that there's a nice ebb and flow of players in and out of the deep desert that makes it to where there's never really much of a queue time, if any queue time at all. My only problem is that if you're on a world that has a high player count, you're probably going to be running into queue times during peak player hours. And let's just say, for example, you have a base that's really deep inside of the deep desert and you log out at that base, but try to log in during peak hours, you just immediately get slapped into the queue. You're unable to log in at that point, unable to possibly defend from a... It's like a weird predicament that Dune Awakening has kind of put themselves in here, especially since the beginning of this game, they were kind of touting how many players were going to be able to be inside of this deep desert, which kind of leads me into my last point here, is there is some people who are complaining who just kind of feel betrayed a little bit, if you will, saying they've recommended to this game to their friends based on the fact that they were assuming that, 1,000 or more players could be inside of this deep desert at one single time, causing mayhem and battling for spice. However, it turns out a third of what they had anticipated can actually be out there. And to that, I would just kind of argue 300 is still a pretty big number. And like I said in the beginning, I'm assuming it's not going to lead to that stale of a PvP scene where it's too hard to find a fight at all, or where the deep desert just isn't a dangerous place because you're never running into conflict. I don't think that's what we're going to run into. I guess time will tell when it comes to this. If I had to place my money on it, I anticipate the 300 player cap being enough to sustain PvP. What I'm unsure on is just how often people are going to be getting hit with the queue times. Fingers crossed that they're hopefully working out a solution to somehow maybe even kick the player cap up to 500. I think would greatly reduce the amount of times people are actually running into queues. It might even get rid of it entirely, because you got to think, for a single world to have 800 players on it at one time trying to get into the deep desert is probably going to be very rare, aside from like the first couple weeks of the game. But 300 players on a world trying to get into the deep desert, I could see that happening on a pretty regular basis, which could definitely be a major problem. 500, I feel like they'd run into a problem a lot less often, if ever. And again, this is just assuming that there's only 20 Haga basins per world. There could be 50 Haga basins per world, and then we're running into a major problem even at 500 players in the deep desert, right? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. We're going to be jumping into the early access launch of Dune Awakening live right here on YouTube and on Twitch, where we're going to be implementing our day one speedrunning strategy. I'll have a link to the Twitch down in the description. Be sure to check that out. Stop by on day one and see how our speedrunning progress is going. If you managed to make it this far into the video, comment "made it" down below or something so I can give you an extra shout out. On top of that, I want to give everybody who's been following the videos and subscribing to the channel over the past month a massive shout out. It has been an insane month for us covering Dune Awakening, and personally, I cannot wait to jump into this game, not only at early access, but for the full launch with our refined speedrun and possibly a guild, and then well into the future. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with some Dune Awakening content. Do me a favor and hit like on the video on your way out. It helps these out massively when it comes to pushing them into the algorithm. But other than that, I hope you guys all have an amazing day. I'm out.